This is CBC Vancouver News.
They should just be very mindful about these risks.
With more rules being placed on Canadians traveling to the U.S. and increased scrutiny at the border, what you need to know before heading south. Plus,
Happy Vaisakhi!
Thousands of people descended on South Vancouver for one of the largest Vaisakhi parades in Canada. Why BC's Premier says it's a show of unity amid growing division.
And I think that's what you're seeing come out in patriotism here as well. The value is reflected in all of us coming together.
Also,
and there are people who should be in jail, yet we continue to see them being released into the public to commit violent offenses.
a man with a lengthy criminal history has been charged after 2 Vancouver police officers were set on fire while patrolling the downtown east side. Hello, I'm Janella Hamilton. Thanks for joining us. As the Trump administration places new rules on Canadians wanting to travel south of the border for more than 30 days, cross-border travel is putting many people on edge, with some Canadians fearing an increased risk of scrutiny when crossing into the States. The CBC's Rafferty Baker has more on what you need to know.
Thinking of making a cross-border trip to the United States? President Donald Trump is focused on border security. People are living their political lives on social media. And then there's the recent case of a Canadian detained for 11 days after applying for a work permit.
I was placed into a holding cell, which was this tiny freezing cold cell with an open toilet. There was about 5 other girls in there, and they handed me this mat with this aluminum foil, and she said, "Here's your blanket."
So has it become riskier for Canadians to travel into the United States? Vancouver immigration lawyer Cindy Switzer says she's not getting more cases where people are in a jam, but she is getting more calls from concerned clients.
It's definitely new that people are concerned about traveling through the border and consequences.
Switzer says if you're a Canadian citizen without a criminal conviction or any other reason for inadmissibility, like an infectious health issue, you should be allowed to enter the United States as a visitor for up to 6 months. If you're a Canadian with citizenship from, say, a Latin American or Middle Eastern country, she says your Canadian passport should do the work. But even something like your place of birth could lead to being held longer at the border and more questions. What if you're entering on a work permit in the United States or applying for one? That appears to have been the case for Jasmine Mooney when she was detained.
Generally speaking, if you have your paperwork in order, it should be fine. But, it's hard to say in this environment.
Megan McDermott with the BC Civil Liberties Association says, like elsewhere in society, discrimination can be at play at the border. She says she's concerned certain groups will face extra scrutiny, questions, risks. People with Muslim-sounding names, those associated with political protest or having opinions that are out of sync with the U.S. administration. Trans people, migrants, temporary workers, foreign students.
For these more vulnerable groups, if they're set on going into the United States or it's unavoidable travel for them, they should just be very mindful about these risks.
So what can you do to protect yourself at the border? It's important to know that border officials have the right to search and seize electronic devices. McDermott says that simply locking your device, putting it in airplane mode, and turning off facial recognition may not be enough. Officials have software to clone and access locked phones.
The absolute best way to protect yourself is to not bring any electronic devices or to bring burner ones that don't have any types of this information on it.
McDermott says for politically active people who may get extra scrutiny, for example, those posting in favor of Palestinians on social media, it's worth making any searchable social media accounts private before your trip. Switzer says while the possibility exists for a thorough device search, extra questioning, and delays or even detention at the border, most people won't experience that. And she says you should be able to simply withdraw your application for admission if you don't like the questioning, and just turn around. To put it plainly though, the vibes at the border have changed.
I wouldn't say that the officers necessarily have this new mindset where they're trying to go after everybody, but there's no question that there's directives from the executive branch to, make sure that the borders are strong.
So, if you're planning a trip across the border into the U.S. anytime soon, make sure you know the powers border officials have and the risks that exist. Rafferty Baker, CBC News, Vancouver.
Mysterious posters have suddenly popped up around Vancouver with a message for Canadians. It's an apology poster, and it reads, "Dear Canada, we are so very, very sorry, your American friends." While many posters have now been removed, we asked Vancouverites what they think about the sincerity of the message.
I think they're a little corny. It's a weird thing to do, a weird way to apologize.
Great. Obviously, the Americans are thinking like we are.
Honestly, it doesn't surprise me. My husband's American, and I have lots of American friends, and I've definitely kind of heard that sentiment, a little bit of embarrassment and empathy.
I know a lot of Americans don't stand by that, and obviously the country's really divided at the moment, and it's nice to see.
I just thought it was really sweet because what's coming out of the States is really hard right now, and to know that there are Americans that appreciate that is kind of nice.
The streets of South Vancouver were transformed into a lively, colorful celebration for the city's annual Vaisakhi parade today. Organizers say it's one of the largest in Canada. And as Saurabh Sandhu reports, this year Canadian patriotism was on full display.
Religious hymns playing from this float. The float is carrying Granth Sahib, the Sikh holy scripture. A large crowd of devotees marching closely.
Happy Vaisakhi!
The Vaisakhi celebrations taking over the streets of South Vancouver Saturday. At the front of the procession, a flag bearer proudly waving the Canadian flag, a show of unity and patriotism during a time of growing division.
The values of the Sikh religion is that we're all human, we see each other's humanity and we support each other. And I think that's what you're seeing come out in patriotism here as well. The value is reflected in all of us coming together.
A few blocks away along the parade route, young dancers mesmerize crowds with their traditional dancing as the aroma of fresh Indian food fills the air. Vaisakhi is an important holy day in Sikhism. It marks the first harvest and the coming of a new year. For many, it also marks the creation of the Order of the Khalsa, a defining moment in history which formed the Sikh faith. The event attracting Sikhs and non-Sikhs from across the Lower Mainland. Armor Valor Corrales says growing up in South Vancouver, Vaisakhi celebrations have become a part of his life.
In specific with the Punjabi and the Filipino community, there is a lot of crossover in the cultures that we have. Family orientated, hardworking. We are deeply rooted with our connection with the motherland.
Others agree. The long-time event brings people from other cultures closer to the Sikh community.
And they're kind of appreciating what we do, and they acknowledge us as our community, how we serve people.
And reconnects with their roots.
They kind of understand the culture, they kind of know more about the culture, they learn more about Sikhism. So it's not just about the food and everything, they kind of interact with us.
Vancouver's Vaisakhi parade has drawn in an estimated 200 to 300,000 people in recent years. An even larger crowd is expected for Surrey's Vaisakhi parade next weekend. Saurabh Sandhu, CBC News, Vancouver.
A man has been charged after 2 police officers were set on fire this week on Vancouver's downtown east side. As Maurice Katz reports, the suspect was wanted on multiple province-wide warrants when he allegedly threw a flammable liquid on one of the officers before lighting it. The man is now facing 1 count of assaulting an officer and 1 count of obstructing a police officer.
A 40-year-old man accused of setting 2 Vancouver police officers on fire has now been charged. Police say officers were on foot patrol in the downtown east side when they tried to arrest a man for jaywalking. The man ran away, got caught, and then allegedly used a flammable substance to ignite the officers' uniforms. The officers are recovering, 1 at home and 1 uninjured.
It's intolerable. It's horrific.
The man was wanted on province-wide warrants. Vancouver councillor and former police officer Brian Montague questions why the man was free in the first place.
There are individuals who deserve bail. There are individuals who we should be looking at things like treatment for whether it's mental health or drug disorders. And there are people who should be in jail. Yet we continue to see them being released into the public to commit violent offenses over and over again.
The police officers were on duty for the VPD's Task Force Barrage, an initiative designed to restore safety in the downtown east side by increasing police presence. Downtown east side advocate Sarah Blythe says many in the community are thankful that the task force is addressing some of the violent incidents, but there have been some concerns.
There has been a lot of safety issues in the downtown east side, and residents have, and people that I know have made it clear to me that there has been violence. That being said, we have to make sure that the vulnerable people are being heard as well, and are being left alone and not targeted, and actually being helped.
Police say more than 35 officers have been assaulted while on duty so far this year. That's a 25% increase from the same time last year. Maurice Katz, CBC News, Vancouver.
A tenancy advocacy group is highlighting the growing number of demevictions in Surrey, with a bus tour taking around communities that have been plagued with tenant displacement. Advocates say stronger tenant protections by the province are needed to crack down on demevictions, hold landlords accountable, and better support vulnerable people. Acorn claims many tenants in BC are being pushed out because of their homes in bad faith.
And the number of people that they had to essentially kick out to make room for this property that's still not happened is absolutely insane. These are families, these are vulnerable people, these are seniors, these are refugees.
The Ministry of Housing says the province has taken steps to allow municipalities to change bylaws that better protect tenants facing displacement, adding it is committed to increasing the supply of housing in BC to provide tenants with more options. Heads up, allergy sufferers. Here's some news you will not love. Canada's sole provider of pollen and outdoor mold forecasts highly allergenic pollen is beginning to affect the Vancouver and Victoria regions.
This weekend, we're seeing high levels of birch in the air as well as cedar. And in the coming weeks, we're seeing the decrease of alder in the air, but we're going to start seeing oak in the next few weeks. Folks in Vancouver, Victoria area, those areas in British Columbia are going to start seeing grass pollen, honestly, in a couple of weeks, which is phenomenal because for the rest of Canada, that's still months away.
Coates says allergy season in Vancouver started earlier than usual, but was delayed by a cold spell. He recommends allergy sufferers to monitor pollen count by going to their website, consult an allergist for medication, and implement lifestyle adjustments such as washing clothes more often and wearing wraparound sunglasses. He says the best time to go for a walk right now is in the rain. Still ahead, with just over 2 weeks until Election Day, Canada's main political party leaders pick up the pace ahead of a big debate. That's next. Stay with us. Day 21 of the election campaign saw Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre addressing Veterans Affairs and accusing the Liberal government of neglect. Marina von Stackelberg reports.
We are in Pierre Poilievre's riding of Carleton in an industrial area of Ottawa, where he announced his plan to improve and standardize support for veterans. So he says he'd do more to make sure veterans' skills from their time with the armed forces can go towards course credits and certification. He says a Conservative government would also prioritize veterans for jobs in the public service and give preference to veteran-owned businesses. Plus, he says he would make sure any income veterans earn in their new careers won't result in having their pensions clawed back. In terms of medical support, Poilievre says he'd make sure veterans qualify for benefits before they leave the military, and says Ottawa would automatically approve disability applications if they aren't processed within 16 weeks.
What I hear from veterans is they want services for themselves and their families. They want direct services, not more bureaucracy. I have not encountered a single veteran that says that he needs more bureaucracy. Those are the frontline benefits that veterans are interested in. Liberals are interested in more bureaucracy.
Poilievre has also promised to increase hiring at the Veterans Affairs Department. Now, this is notable because the last time the Conservatives were in power, they soured their relationship with veterans. Under Stephen Harper, the Conservatives made major cuts to the Veterans Affairs Department. That included closing several offices in regions across the country and slashing hundreds of frontline jobs, which led to a delay in claims. Now, the Trudeau Liberals also failed to deal with the backlog and have come under fire from wounded veterans for failing to bring in proper supports for disabled soldiers. Marina von Stackelberg, CBC News, Ottawa.
The leader of Bloc Québécois is calling on Mark Carney to do more to protect the province's aluminum industry amid the U.S. trade war.
When a threat was imposed on Ontario car industry, the federal government answers rapidly because this is the way they see Canada. If an economic problem is happening in Quebec, not much sound in Ottawa.
Speaking at an aluminum parts manufacturer, Blanchette repeated a call for the industry to have access to favorable credit rates so that projects that are already underway can be guaranteed. The party is also calling on Ottawa to redistribute money collected from counter tariffs back into the industry. Quebec produces most of Canada's aluminum. 90% of it is shipped south of the border, where it has been hit with a 25% tariff for the past month. For his part, Liberal leader Mark Carney did not have any official public events today, but the Liberal campaign did release a statement announcing a plan to give minors free access to museums and national galleries this summer. Plus, they would travel free on via rail with their parents. Carney also spoke with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte today. They talked about Canada's commitment to the alliance. Earlier this week, Carney announced a temporary pause in public campaign events to deal with U.S. tariffs.
Ottawa works best when one party doesn't have all the power, when we're there to hold them honest, when we're there to make sure that things get done. Because we know things don't happen in Ottawa unless New Democrats are there.
That's NDP leader Jagmeet Singh speaking at a rally in Timmins, Ontario. He repeated his hopes for a minority government and called on voters to send more New Democrats to Ottawa. Singh says the NDP is the only party that can be trusted to prioritize issues like health and dental care. He reiterated his party's commitment to ensure every Canadian has a family doctor by 2030 and says the NDP will cap the price of food essentials to bring down the price of groceries. An all-candidates forum was held in Kimberley Friday night, where hopefuls discussed a myriad of topics from climate change and economic development to the trade war with the U.S. The CBC's Corey Bullock caught up with voters in Kimberley to see what's on their mind.
What matters to you?
Well, I understand the tariffs are a big thing right now. Of course, it's important for everyone in the economy. But really, for me, the number one thing is climate action.
You know, what I think is on everybody's mind this election, and not probably in previous elections, but our relationship with our southern neighbor.
The most vital issues for me are climate change and housing.
Dozens of Kimberley residents were in attendance at Friday night's all-candidate forum, where 4 of 6 candidates for the Columbia-Kootenay Southern Rockies riding spoke on a number of issues.
I have no right to tell a woman what she can and can't do with her body, and this issue is settled.
Small businesses could thrive in ways that maybe today's entrepreneurs and practitioners wouldn't even be able to imagine if we seriously revolutionized our tax system.
Of course, the trade war between the U.S. and Canada was a hot-button topic.
Diversifying our trade, diversifying the partners we do business with is absolutely critical. I am fully supportive of the strong retaliatory measures that Canada has displayed.
We need to start changing the way that we are actually exporting our wood and start looking at other markets other than down south.
But what do their constituents really want to hear about?
I'm from Mexico originally, and I never experienced wildfires or see the changing seasons as dramatically as I have now. And
you know, I see Canadian flags everywhere. I see businesses that are, proud to be Canadian. Why is that? Because we want to remain Canadian, and I think we're concerned. We're nervous about our future.
Why does that matter to you so much?
Well, I'm on the land every day. I teach outdoor education with the kids in Kimberley and Cranbrook here, and I see the changes that have happened, and I see the impacts in the fire. Living here in Kimberley for 16 years, we didn't have a lot of fire back then, and all of a sudden, I feel like in the last 10 years, we're really experiencing a lot of the impacts of climate change. I see it in the winters, the lack of snowpack.
Canadians have just over 2 weeks to make their decision. Corey Bullock, CBC News, Cranbrook.
Here we have a live shot of Whistler from the Sundial Hotel. Coming up after the break, I'll have your full forecast. All right, it is time now to take a look at your weekend weather. Let's begin with a quick peek at the current temperatures around the province tonight, beginning up in Dease Lake, -3 and cloudy. Over in Kelowna, it's going to be 1 degree overnight and rainy. And on the island, about 3 degrees in both Tofino and Victoria. Heading into tomorrow, that rain is sticking around for Dease Lake with a high of 6 for tomorrow. Pretty rainy in places like Terrace and Bella Coola as well. In Prince George, a mix of sun and clouds and a high of 9 for tomorrow. And heading into Cranbrook, 11 is your high with a mix of sun and clouds, and much clearer in Victoria with a high of 13 and 11 in Tofino for tomorrow. Here in Metro Vancouver, sun, and more sun. Starting with a 12 degrees is our expected high for tomorrow, and that looks like it's going to continue for the remainder of the week. That is your late news for this Saturday. Thanks so much for watching. To keep up to date with all the latest news, you can visit our website at cbc.ca/bc. We'll see you tomorrow.